All right. So remember last week they were in the car and they found out they got, what did they get in the car? Not last week, but yesterday or the day before. What did they get, Macy? A radio that plays albums in the car, right? And they were going to listen to a 45, which is a smaller album. Remember, it only has one song on each side. Miles, you have a question? Thank you so much. Save my life.
Welcome.
You too. Miles, did you have a question? Okay. So they were listening to the music, and it was going doom da doom 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 da doom doom. The notes were so deep and strong, it felt like we were sitting inside a giant bass fiddle. Mama screamed and put both of her hands over her mouth. She'd recognized her song after the first couple of notes. The guy on the record started singing Under the Boardwalk. And I had to turn around and look because it sounded like he was right in the back seat with Dad. We sat in the car for almost 2 hours as everybody got a chance to go in the house and get their favorite records. Even though we had a pretty good record player in the house, it couldn't compare with the sounds that came from that scientifically and mathematically put in speakers that the Brown Bomber had. The Ultra Glad cast a spell on all of the weird Watsons. Byron was always saying that Mama couldn't stand to see anyone having too much fun. But to be fair to her, I have to say that she stopped us from having fun in steps instead of doing it all at once. First, she thought the music was too loud and made us turn it down some. Then, after all of us kids got to play 4 songs, which I played Yakety Yak all 4 of my times. How many of you know what the song Yakety Yak is? I'll play it for you when we get done. Yes. She made us get out of the car, and she and Dad played Nat King Cole and Dinah Washington and other mushball singers that she said to Dad, "Did you tell him yet?" Uh-oh. I leaned into the car to get a look at Mama's stomach. This sounded like the way Byron and me found out we were going to get a sister. Everybody's ears jumped up. Something big was going on. Dad wasn't too comfortable with things like this, and he said, "No, it can wait." "No, it can't." Mama let the last song finish and said, "Turn it off, Daniel." "Children, in a little bit, Daddy's going to get some vacation time, and we're going to drive to Alabama. Grandma Sands is going to keep Byron for the summer. And if things don't work out, he'll stay there for the next school year." This was too good to be true. A long trip in the Brown Bomber and no Byron for the whole summer and probably for the whole year. Because when it came to Byron, nothing ever worked out. Byron looked at Mama and Dad with his mouth wide open. "We've been telling you, Byron. You've been given warning after warning and chance after chance to straighten up. But instead of improving, you're getting worse. Do I have to remind you of the things you've done just this last year?" Byron still didn't close his mouth. Mama started ticking off the things that Byron called his latest fantastic adventure. "You've cut school so much that Mr. Alums has come here 3 times to see what's wrong with you. You've been lighting fires. You've been taking change out of my purse. You've been in fights. You had the trouble up at Mitchell's food fair. You had that problem with Marianne Hill. You set mouse traps in the backyard for birds. You fell out of that tree when you were trying to see if the poor cat always landed on its feet and got that conch. You joined the gang. That's just way too much, Byron. We can't have all this nonsense going on. I hope these weren't the only latest fantastic adventures that Mama knew about. I could come up with a list with about 100 more. That's why Grandma Sands is going to look after you for a while. You're about to run us crazy." Mama changed the tone of her voice. "You're going to like Birmingham, Byron. It's a lot different than Flint. There are lots of nice boys your age down there you can be friends with. There's lots of fishing and hunting that you can do. Things are a lot better there. I love that city. Your grandma tells me it's quite quiet in our old neighborhood. She says that stuff on TV isn't happening around her. It's just like I remember it being. It's safe, it's quiet, and there's no butt fed. Mama and Dad had threatened to send Byron to Grandma Sands about 1,000,000 times, but we never thought it would happen. This was for 3 good reasons. The first reason was that Alabama was about 2,000,000 miles from Flint, and Byron knew Mama wouldn't let him ride the bus that far alone. He also knew it would be just about impossible for her to sit on a bus with him for 3 days it took to get there. The second reason was that Mama and Dad were always threatening to do stuff to Byron that everybody knew they wouldn't do. Dad had been keeping a countdown on how many more months it would be before they could force him to join the army, but we knew they wouldn't do that. But the biggest reason Byron and Joey and me thought they'd never send him to Alabama was because we had heard so many horrible stories about how strict Grandma Sands was. The thought of living with her was so terrible that your brain would throw it out as soon as it came in. Well, Byron's brain had better get used to it. We all knew by the way they'd gotten the bomber ready, and by the way Mama's voice sounded when they meant it this time. The big, cool baby finally shut his mouth and ran into the house. He slammed the door as hard as he could, and we all heard him say, real clear, the S word. Joey said, "Ooh." Dad started going after him. Mama said, "Let him be, Daniel. He better get as much of that nonsense out of his system as he can, because Grandma Sands won't be putting up with any of that mess." So, they're going to turn on Yakety Yak real quick. So, they are going to send him to the grandmother. Do you think he's going to enjoy that? No, probably not.